Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Devtoberfest Week 2, Day 1. And this is one of the amazing sessions we've got for you lined up today. I am absolutely super excited. And I mean that. I'm not just making that up. It's not just words. We have with us right now live. I don't care what people say. I'm going to call him the benevolent dictator for life, the Cap Papa, the one and only Daniel Hutzel. Daniel, welcome, first of all. Come and say hello before I start the introducing the session.
Hi, thanks for having me, DJ.
You're very welcome. So let me explain what this session is all about. Now, as we can see from the slide, the art and science of Cap, there's a word below that which I want to concentrate on first, which is the word kickoff. So Devtoberfest, being the most important tech event for SAP developers in the annual calendar, obviously, we thought we'd use Devtoberfest to kick off a series of conversations with Daniel, a series of conversations about CAP. But what specifically? Hands up in the audience if you, like me, have seen the amazing documentation in, well, sometimes I call it Capire, sometimes I call it Capire, in Capire, the amazing documentation in the getting started section, the introduction about CAP. How many people, put your hands up, have read through that, skimmed through it and not really given it much attention? Me, for example. But it's full of amazing insights because for me, CAP is full of magic, right? It's full of magic. I'm constantly surprised and awed and just mind blown by the things that CAP will do for me. But as we all know, there is no such thing as magic. Actually, what's happening is that you are experiencing what Daniel is calling, quite rightly, the art and the science of CAP. And in this series, kicking off today in this live Devtoberfest session, we're going to start this series off. So I've done enough talking. Daniel's got the slide. He keeps moving around the mouse to say, DJ, stop talking, let me go. So Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, DJ. And not at all. Don't stop talking, and always interrupt me, please. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you. Yeah, and to what you just said with Capire, yeah, the idea is of Capire to be like the word tells us, the means for us to tell you how to use Cap and for you to understand how to use it. So capire stands for understanding. And you may know we never do as best or as good as we should do, maybe. At least I'm always thinking we could do better, but we don't find the time or we don't find the right ways to address the right things. And that's actually the idea behind this starting some kind of series without having a title, that highlights a few things that we frequently find when we look into projects or in projects starting with CAP. Um, Obviously, they didn't understand why we decided to do things like that in CAP. Maybe they didn't even see what we decided, like the design principles. And yeah, run into problems of that. Maybe CAP is too complicated. Maybe there's too much, not magic, but even voodoo in it that is too hard to understand. And therefore, we thought about having a series started, a series of block entries first. But then DJ came up with the idea to have a series of talks. And yeah, the idea was to combine both ideas and at the outcome have an improved cap hire, an improved set of blogs, documents, series, where we can highlight some things that we should have shared in a better way from the beginning, maybe. Yeah. Regarding this title, of course, this title is a bit bold, right? This is just to explain you where this title comes from. Uh, when I was quite young, in sort of the 80s of last century, millennium, I worked a lot with the Smalltalk 80 programming language, which some of you might know. And there was this nice book by this guy, Simon Lewis from Hewlett Packard. And I loved first the title and I loved the book and how he wrote things. Actually, what he did is he explained how to use Smalltalk, which is the art of using Smalltalk, as he phrased it, and then highlighted some of the key principles behind that usage patterns that Smalltalk promoted. And some of these principles and concepts were invented by Smalltalk. So the Smalltalk guys invented a lot of stuff, as you might know. And also common principles that people should know, which were even truths beyond Smalltalk. Yeah, so the title is really borrowed from that book and the same idea. The science parts should highlight the key concepts on a deductive way, maybe, and also giving some rationales of why we chose to do it that way. And this is also a very important part that we haven't in documented in CapHire. So, for example, there's one thing that maybe we should share. CAP is actually created as an offspring of a former project I led at SAP, which was about performance firefighting. And there was a famous product and technology piece of SAP at that time, 28, which had some performance problems. And we had this, yeah, team of very cool guys where we try to identify the root causes of these performance problems and how to do things better. And actually CAP is, or actually CDS was the first thing that came out of that. And CAP was the second thing that came out of that. CDS is about giving them what they are looking for when they want to do queries. And CAP is and adding a runtime framework to that CDS thing. So CAP is like CDS version 2, or CDS is like CAP version 1. And uh, Kronos offsprings.
Actually, just before we
Yeah.
move away from
Mhm.
Smalltalk, I think I mean, for many people, Smalltalk is just another programming language, but it's absolutely not. I mean, first of all, how many people have been to GitHub and seen the avatar that Daniel has in GitHub? It's the Smalltalk logo, which is the very colorful balloon, hot air balloon, and the little island that actually appeared. I think that was based on a Robert Tinney artwork from the Byte magazine from the 80s. All about there was an edition about Smalltalk, right?
Yeah.
So Daniel's avatar on GitHub is the Smalltalk logo. But I think more importantly, I'm thinking of the phrase, standing on the shoulders of giants or standing on the brains of, there we go, that's the one, that's from Byte magazine. Yeah, standing on the brains of giants. Smalltalk was not just another language. Smalltalk was this complete enclosed, beautiful thing that had everything you need to think about programming, to write your code, to debug it, to run it all in one beautiful, complete package. Not only that, but of course, it was arguably the one true and only pure implementation of what we know or what we should know as object orientation. It's gone horribly wrong somewhere over the decades, but that's another story completely. But Smalltalk as the basis, the way Daniel describes it, I think Daniel, I think you'd agree that it's more important to think about Smalltalk and where that came from Park, where Alan Kay worked. In fact, Alan Kay was one of the creators of Smalltalk. So these are big ideas that are informing CAP's design, right, Daniel?
Definitely. And as I like this saying of standing on the shoulders of giants. So these guys were giants. I'm just this small little guy watching at them in wonder at that time, and now standing a bit on them. That's a good feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe we could, that brings us actually also to this next slide, which I took this graphic from exactly this book, The Art and Science of Smalltalk here. In the introduction, Lewis explained, well, when you start working with Smalltalk, you might feel a bit discomforted because things are a bit alien to you. You know, at that time, the programming language which were out there were C, COBOL, what
Yep.
else? Some other. And then came
Fortran.
Smalltalk and, sorry,
Fortran.
Fortran, of course. Yeah. And COBOL, is an ancestor to ABAP. So cool languages, but Smalltalk was very different. And why was that? Because it was introducing things which these guys invented, like object-oriented programming, taken from Simula language. So a language called Simula by Mr. Birdwhistle, but nobody knows Simula. Um, and also was heavily influenced by Lisp, which in itself was a very alien language, right? I think DJ, you know Lisp. I only know the cool stuff of it, but never used it. You used it, right?
Yes, well, I've used it in different in other Lisp forms, for example, Clojure, and also, I mean, you could almost say that the Lambda library for JavaScript is very, very strongly
Yeah.
influenced by a lot of the Lisp principles.
Right. Exactly. So Lisp introduced functional programming, of course, and even more, this very strange way to think about programs. It's all about lists. Lists are all about data, and programs are just data. At the end of the day, of course, they are bytes. And Lisp took this to an extreme. Yeah, and this
Yes,
is also the thing in Smalltalk. Yeah, means what he is saying in this book. Hey, yeah, you find it alien, but you will reach that point here very soon where you get very, very productive, much more productive than you were in the old times. Now, would be great if with CAP this would be the same, but I would not claim that we are comparable to Smalltalk and the effects of that. But we have a similar thing maybe on this. Some things are alien to people who know other frameworks before. And that is also, as we found out, some reason that causes them going wrong ways or using Cub in the wrong way or not understanding the key things that we would have loved to understand them, but just failed to explain good enough in Cap Higher. Maybe here's a few things that is just about a thing like, we have seen a lot of projects starting with designing their microservice topology. And well, CUP is cool in supporting microservices, but microservices on themselves mean you have a distributed system and you have
yeah,
all the pain with distributed systems. And sometimes people started to think, it looks like at least, um, yeah, things like a library or a package was replaced by you have to have a microservice. No, you can still have libraries. Um, yeah, and it's also different to Olinko. We saw some projects using CUP as like a better Olinko to serve Fiori UIs. CUP can more than serving Fiori UIs or OData APIs. It's also different from ABAP. That is a whole story on its own, but has also some similarities, by the way. And yeah, that is also something that we saw recently. CUP has a real tremendous adoption uh, jump in the last year because a lot of SAP units now started to use CUP, which before didn't use it. And these were a lot of Java camps. And what we figured out is when you speak a language for a long time, you start thinking in this language. This not only happens to German, but also to Java, maybe. Yeah, people think in Java and in the concepts of Java, and this we saw in the CDS models. Another thing, yeah, very common is the object relational mapper. Whenever you do something with some framework, doing some nice things on top of relational databases, there's a snap in of a thought. Well, it's an object relational mapper. No, it's not. CDS is the opposite of object relational mapper. But again, another, yeah, maybe a topic for several sessions that you could have, DJ.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about here, looking at this, what CAP and CDS are not, I think to be fair to mere mortals like me and folks in the audience, in order to understand something, and we're talking about CAP, and CAP does a lot of things. CAP has a lot of capabilities and does a lot of stuff for us. I think it's natural to think in CAP in terms of, well, is it like this? Does it do that? Does it do this? Is it like this? Can I relate it to that? So I think actually this is great that we're starting to think about the different areas that CAP touches, but think in terms of what it's not, and it's really important. I mean, you say, for example, if you're programming a language long enough, then of course naturally you start to think in that language, which is part of the point of becoming proficient in that language. The
Yeah.
unfortunate thing is, looking at Java and ORM, is those are not very fortunate things to start thinking in terms of, especially from an ORM perspective, which is, well,
Right.
I'm going to say, you don't have to say, ORM has quite rightly, not the greatest of reputations.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the fun thing is, before doing CAP in my former life, before joining SAP, I actually implemented 3 ORMs, one in C++, one in C, and one in Smalltalk. I loved working with ORMs, but then I learned what the bad things of ORM are, especially when it comes to, yeah, today we say cloud applications. An object relational mapper is a thing that tries to mimic what at that time we called object databases. There were really some
Yeah,
object databases like Versant, and they worked very well when you had an object cache. Which means the next time a query addresses the same objects in your thought object graph, it was already in memory in the object cache. Now, the problem with stateless application is the next request hits another machine where your object cache is not filled. And that's why
yeah.
ORMs failed in this transition to stateless applications, server-based applications with clusters and cloud today. There are some other reasons, like the object relational impedance mismatch that you should know. A great paper by, yeah, I referenced it in CAPI, I think. Yeah, and that's why we killed ORM and did something else. And yeah, but yeah, I'm afraid we need really a full session on that, at least to start with, and then maybe to go even further.
This is a great problem to have.
Bob, you may know Bob if you're from ABAP. It's a business object persistence framework, a great piece of software. Um, hero tasks done by the developers. I know that so Daniel is the developer of Bob, the original one, Daniel Zoch, and did great work. But it was just following the object relational mapper approach, which were very prominent at that time, and therefore has a problem of that. And also trying to do things like yeah, managing persistent state and transactional state and and trying to keep them in sync to some way. And yeah, CAP is about no state. And yeah, okay. So going a bit further, so what is CAP if we now saw what it is not? And this is like just a list of topics that we could touch further on
Yeah,
in this series of talks, which I would really look for. But two, so it's like an initial backlog for task. which is the art and science of Smalltalk, by the way, this acronym.
Nice.
Mm. I'm always good in acronyms like CAP, Khaleesi. There is a saying, by the way, by Adela Goldberg, one of the inventors of Smalltalk. She phrased it like that: each computer scientist worth his salt should be able to do anything out of an acronym. So it means first you search for an acronym and then for a meaning. Uh,
Nice. Nice. Yep.
okay.
Similar to with the concept of a backronym, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, so I put this in this scheme of art. So things that you should know and we should tell you how to use and understand it, and then things behind this art, like what are the sciences. And on the sciences part, definitely that one is very important. It's not the not invented here thing. It's about really recognizing and understanding we didn't invent these things, but some great guys did. And again, standing on the shoulder of giants helps a lot. And yeah, if at all, so Cup didn't invent anything. If at all, it identified things, maybe distinguished some pearls from pebbles, and putting the pearls together into something that hopefully is useful. So means we try to choose and use very proven concepts and yeah, not inventing something else. So in complete, yeah, difference to the Smalltalk guys, which invented a lot.
That's right. I mean, I'm trying to think who it was. Was it Dali? Salvador Dali did say, "Good artists copy, great artists steal."
Yeah.
And I
Right,
think it's
right.
fair to say that in that is very relevant here. I find myself, and maybe other folks are like this, but folks in the chat are like this as well. I'm learning something about a new area of CAP or a new feature, and I'm not understanding it. But I have the confidence to know that I'm not understanding it because I don't understand it, because it's my fault, because what I'm trying to understand is not broken. It's just so beautifully designed that I haven't got my brain around it yet. And that I think is a helpful way to think about this, given this sort of this smorgasbord of different aspects, artistic aspects and scientific aspects here. You know, there are reasons why CAP functions like this, like that, like the other.
Yeah. By the way, I just looked at the watch. So how many time do we have left?
We have 2 minutes left. No, just kidding. We've got another 35 minutes left.
Okay, so then we should maybe get started into some content. So DJ, I thought about offering you to choose from the menu, and then I will tell you what I do, right?
I, I I was just reading the other day on Khaleesi, sorry, on Capire, about domain modeling, and that is, I think, at the heart of what CDS is all about, right? In fact, I thought that was what you're going to be talking about a little bit earlier when you referenced a previous project. But CDS is almost like the common currency for us all. So if we could talk a little bit about domain modeling first, that would be a great start, I think.
Right. I think that would be the topic for today. It's very much on that topic, and good choice, by the way. So good, we had the briefing before. Um, and that is so it's looking into that. It's looking into that things basically, and into the Cup is not Java topic and doing some hands-on. And this is why what we should do. Now, but starting again with some more talk, it's about domain-driven design ideas. You know the paper of domain-driven design and the work. Um, what we share is the ideas. I like this sentence in the introduction of the domain-driven design papers, which are telling us, hey, do something that allows close collaboration of domain experts and developers
Yeah.
to iteratively refine your knowledge about your domain, about your application domain. And this is the idea I totally share. I don't share all the details later on, um, which go, which are too Java-ish for me, but definitely about these goals. which means really talking about domain experts is a key thing that somebody who is doing domain models should keep in mind. So don't create domain models which nobody than you would understand, because then you lost the domain experts. Or what we just met recently, people keep asking us, hey, we need extensibilities for key uses. Now, what does a key user need in order to add an extension field to something? The idea of something. So, and what could something be? Maybe the UI you are working with each day, UI Flex. So SAP UI5 Flex is about this. And therefore we integrated it years ago. And the other thing is maybe a domain model, like I have books, I have authors, but it has to be a domain model that they can still understand, not
Yeah.
polluted with technical aspects. So
So
that's
that actually reminds me of one of the philosophies that drives CDS is that yes, it's related. You can sort of think of SQL,
yeah,
but SQL is the way I think about this is that it's too much low level because with SQL you have joins, whereas you elevate your brain up to the domain and start talking in terms of associations, which CAP
right.
looks after for you and protects you from the details. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Definitely. This is exactly what I wanted to start with. Let's close this one here. Yeah, you know, our famous bookshop thing. And
My
when we look
favorite.
at that domain model, by the way, the confusion maybe starts with, it's called, the folder is called DB, but it's actually a domain model because that could be also a model in the same way that has no DB behind it. So
Yeah.
exactly as you said, DJ, the idea is really modeling your the core entities of your domain, like we're talking about books and authors, and books have uh, associations to authors, and authors have a association to many books. Actually, this for me is already too complicated, too technical, but much better than dealing with joins all over the
Yeah.
place. There's
Actually, sorry, Daniel, can you just command plus a couple of times the bump up the font size, please?
yeah, and maybe
Thank you.
that one's smaller, of course. Yeah, and yeah, books, by the way, are no associations, by the way, are forward declared joins. This is really, I even wrote a paper to convince our HANA colleagues to have native support for associations in HANA, and they did. And it's really about these forward declared joins, but then you are gone with the database. Maybe a topic for another session.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about keep it simple. And what you also saw already, well, maybe, yeah, going back to the storyline first, another thing is keep it simple, stupid. We know this saying of, I think it was a Navy engineer in the 60s. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep the planes flying. Don't make it too complex.
Yeah.
Uh, that may means in that case, when you have things like that, for example, we have a lot of discussion. People start immediately when they think about Smalltalk called magnitudes, so values with a unit. You would model something like a money type and say, and a money type has an amount and a currency. By the way, did you see Copilot in action here? I like this.
I did. I almost spat my tea out in disgust.
It is great to see that Copilot knows up, right? Yeah, so and then you would say price is a money thing. Um, the thing is, yeah, from a modeler perspective, it's nicer, but you end up in a lot of problems later on. For example, what we had in some application, they say, hey, I have a price and I have a total price
Yeah.
and the net price. So, and now I need to make sure that the price currency and the total price currency and the net price currency are the same currency, of course, because it doesn't make sense to compare apples with oranges here. And how can that be solved? Well, quite simple. Just don't do. structure types all over the place. Yes, we support it and we invested a lot in CUP to support structure types all over the place, but take it with a grain of salt. In case of question, keep your world as flat as Earth, right? Actually, I looked
Fantastic.
into
I love
my
that phrase. In fact, is it fair to say that, I mean, one of the things that really strikes me about staring at this is that there is in the CDS file contents, there's very little ceremony.
exactly.
And that for me is an important thing for us, me and the audience and the rest of the folks watching here, is to actually understand, and I don't mean appreciate in a, I am not worthy type sense, but in a what the thing, I think you haven't talked about this yet, but for example, the aspect managed in this case,
Mhm.
it's, you almost could miss it. It's so subtle and so simple and unassuming, but the power behind that is just bonkers. So maybe we'll get to that. But also
Exactly.
because we're thinking in terms of the data now, passive data, active services, that allows us, I think, to think about this in a different way than how we might think about data in the context of a programming language. Is that a fair way of looking at this?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and trying to focus on the important things and put out of sight the non-important things. Like managed means we want to manage, have, yeah, track changes of books. In that case, a very simple one. When what is created by whom, and when was the last modification by whom. We will actually revisit exactly this when we go to more details on the aspects part. Another thing I wanted to share before is another practice that we frequently see. What should be the type of this element price here? And sometimes we see something like this. Type price is a decimal, line 2. This is actually a bad example because that could be helpful in that case, but nevertheless. And then I say it's price. And then currency is currency, and we could introduce another type for stock. Like stock should be an integer. And at the end of the day, was even in some languages or some environments a best practice called the best practice. The type of an element called foo should be the foo type. And CAP says, no, that is a bad practice because when looking at this thing, you don't see anymore what it is. So what is stock? I have to look up the definition of stock to find out it's an integer. So in case of question, again, keep the earth as flat as possible and just give us the direct information
Yeah.
if there is no better reason to not have it like that. So the reason could be you have a large reuse. So use reuse types if your reuse ratio is greater than at least 1, but rather greater than 10. And otherwise, don't pollute too much with reuse types. There's also another thing. If you need to reuse the type of that thing, you can say, okay, then I create a type as we just had it called price, and then I can reuse this price thing at another place, like here. It will also be then price,
Mhm.
here, whatever. But what can also do, doesn't make sense here, of course, you can refer to this elements type over there.
Yeah.
So it's like, and you can even write type of in CDS for that. We will also revisit that thing. Everything in CDS is a definition, not even a type. And a type is an aspect of a definition, and you can refer to other definitions always. And this is about what CDS is about. We actually don't know types if you're okay, but we'll revisit that, as I said. Okay, yeah, this was the very starting point of the keep it simple, stupid thing. Now, another thing is really aspects. we already had aspects, and as you said, you don't even see it. You can oversee it because it's not important for the domain understanding. Who does care whether it's part of our job as the uh, yeah programmers to track changes to the things? That is not very domain relevant. So we try to keep that out of our model and just share it. And we can see here there's a definition of aspect. It's like that. By the way, there's a lot of annotations to it, which you also don't want to see in your model. I can show you what the actual model looks about. You know this, you can always display the model in its season incarnation, so how it looks like in season. And that's just a YAML variant of displaying it, because YAML is better readable than the JSON.
I
But you
agree.
can see here, there's a lot of annotations here, which you just get and don't see here. Now think of having to write that here without the managed aspect, add a field created add a lot of annotations like all these that we see over here. Sorry, yeah, you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like that. If you know ABAP, then you have seen this in ABAP. And what is the reason for ABAP of having it like that? Because they have this concept of a development object. Where do you define something? In its development object, which is like the file or the artifact where you define something. And yes, the ABAP guys also now introduced having annotations put somewhere else, but that was an extra effort. In CAP, as you know, we don't have repositories, so there is no concept of a development object. It's just files, and aspects allow you to put things everywhere and spread a definition over many places. We will
I think
see
there's
this.
also a beautiful contrast, a beautiful reflection here, because we started talking about Smalltalk.
Yeah,
And in a way, you can still almost think of Smalltalk as the environment, a little bit like the ABAP environment, where there are no files and
yeah,
everything is that there's a slot for everything. Okay, so you have to think
right.
in those terms and so on. Whereas while a lot of the philosophy that drives CAP comes from Smalltalk, one thing that doesn't is exactly that.
Exactly. And actually, when I worked in Smalltalk, it was nice to have everything at your fingertips in this big running system,
Yeah,
like an ABAP system, really like. So
yeah.
ABAP was influenced, I think, even from Smalltalk. I know these, you know, the ABAP guys are great guys, Rode, and all the existing guys as well, you know.
Mm.
The only thing I was missing in Smalltalk at that time was files, working in files, because that came so common. Meanwhile, yeah. Okay. Now going on with this thing, yeah, using aspects for separation of concern. So this concern of something is managed. We just factored out, put it into another definition. We called it an aspect. You can also think of an aspect as just a structured type. And whenever you inherit an aspect, these elements, as we see it here, get added to where it is inherited. This, think of this column like inherits from. We will see that this is wrong later on. Yeah, and you see other cases in your project, if you did already CAP development, where you applied separation of concerns, like, you know, we have here our services, the admin service, which tries to focus on the key of what this admin service does. You know, services in CDS describe your interfaces to the outside world, by the way, inbound and outbound. And what we say here is always, and they provide facets on top of our data. You are not allowed to access data directly, but only through these interfaces, which are facets. And admin service says, if you're an admin, then you can access books, my books, through this facet. And I can also say we have other facets, other denormalized views on that. For the end users, we say you don't get access to our books as is, but to list of books without description and to the details of our books without access to the author itself, but only to the author name. as part of books and excluding things you should not see, like the names of our administrators or back office staff that maintains the books. So services are interfaces. We try to focus on what the service is about, what the interface is built, how, and then you applied aspect-oriented development things and separation of concerns when you followed our approach of, oh, I have to move now to another example. Let's take this one. When we followed our approach of, this is our service, and here it's a travel service, and then all these, all these annotations of your, which I don't understand, a lot of work.
Yeah, no.
And we just put them into out of sight. At the end of the day, you annotate the service. So we annotate even the entities, and here we annotate the travel service. But instead of polluting the definition of the travel service with all these annotations, we put them out of sight. All these common field control and facets and UR line items, etc. And this means we applied separation of concerns, and you do so and obviously enjoy it because we didn't get any complaints about the separation of concern. That
Well, I
just
think
goes on. Sorry.
no, sorry. I think one of the reasons why there's no complaints is that what's occurred to me while you've been describing this, and I've stared at CDS definitions, or CDL, should say CDL definitions, for a long time, is that going back to where this all is being driven from, or why it is as it is because we want to enable the domain experts to talk about the problem domain in a common language that is the lowest common denominator language, which is this declarative set of tools we have here in CDS files. Now, it just feels, I've realized why everything seems so relaxed. And I mean relaxed in terms of the way things are described. It's almost like it's so relaxed, we're lying down describing these things because it's so easy to refer to an element of another entity, for example, like you had that previous example with the type books, :price, or whatever it was. It's so easy to use, for example, annotate or extend to extend the service or extend an entity, that we don't have to think about everything at once while we're thinking about building the domain model. We can just have a conversation about and discover as we go the model that we're trying to build.
Exactly. Exactly. Focus on the first things first, the important things first, add the other things later on, and always know you can always refactor it, right? It's quite easy to refactor things. This is also an example. So we add the restrict annotation here. If you have a more complex example, then your restrict annotation, so the access control annotation, might get very ugly and pollute your model. So what you can do is just take them out, add another file, say our access control model, say using from travel services, and get the travel service from there, and then say, hey, annotate travel service travel, which was the entity where we cut it from right now, with this annotation. Means I took out this concern into a separate file. I can give this file to a skilled owner, to a guy who understands how to do access control model, while the domain experts can stick to that one, or the interface experts. It's really about separation of concerns, and separation of concerns is also about give ownership of certain content to those guys who have the best skills on that. And the end of the thing is just the same. There's nothing else you need to do. If you start the server, we will read the definitions from here, the definitions from here, and that sums up to the effective definition of travel service travel, which looks like the one before where it was in one file. So that's about separation of concern. Using Fiori annotations, like for authorizations, for analytics, we can do that. For data privacy, we have some documentation that tells you, hey, put your data privacy annotation in a separate file. You're not forced to, but you can always do so. Now, another thing of using aspects is for extensibility. By the way, I should mention, why is that also called an aspect here? Because what you could also do is you could say, I declare an aspect. Let's say access control list for travels. And it should be an empty object and should have this annotation. So now I have this aspect defined here.
Now, if that's not a thing of beauty, I don't know what is.
Say again?
If that is not a thing of beauty, I don't know what is.
Exactly. Now I can say, hey, I annotate the travel service travel, or I extend it with this ACL for travels. And it's the same model, which means aspects can be things that carry something like additional elements or annotations, and you can extend author definitions with aspects like named aspects, as this one here, or anonymous aspects like what we did with the annotate statement. The
Beautiful.
technique behind is all the same. It's just about aspects. We see more on that as well if we have spare time. Yeah, the other thing is using aspects for extensibility. This is where you might have seen them most. And this brings me to another example I'd like to share, which we had recently. Let's do it in this empty project here. Yeah, following example. Don't care about this test thing. What did I do here? Yeah. Let's think about, hey, you want to build an application that deals with orders and invoices. So I have orders and I have invoices. And I should use, here we go, and also customers. And yeah, like that, we can keep that out. And invoices similarly. Keep it out for the time being. Now, think of what you want to do as well is, no, my orders have a different key. They should have an order ID as a string. These
Yep.
should have a UUID. And
I think we could have a whole episode in this series about UUIDs, or maybe that's too technical, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's another topic. Now think of, and this was a Java thing. Well, these are actually business objects in the understanding of these guys, and they wanted to make sure of this program or this project that all business objects share some commonalities. So they introduced something like core, in which they defined the business object base class. And they said a business object should, what should it have? Always have something like created at.
Yeah.
They didn't have managed at that time, so they did it like that.
Hmm.
And then they used that. Learn to type faster, sorry.
No, it's okay because I think as slow as you type.
And the same one over here.
I think while Daniel's typing this in, I think folks who are not already using either IntelliJ, for example, or VS Code to explore CDS, use one of those two IDEs because of the power of the CDS plugin, the CAP plugin extension for these editors, because it allows you to explore CDS like this, and maybe makes the exploration a bit more comfortable and allows you to go a little bit further in thinking about this. Anyway.
Right. Definitely. And let us know when something doesn't work. So things like that should work, of course. Okay, so now our orders, customers, and invoices all share these common things that were given to us. And now think, and this was actually the case, there was a new team coming up. So this was in the ownership of the core foundation team. And these were projects, the invoice project, and this was another project, the orders project, using this outcome of the core foundation team. And our new team came up and said, well, we are like a middle layer team,
Hmm.
and they wanted to extend what these business objects are about. They wanted to say, hey, all the business objects should, in addition, have a reference to an entity that we introduced, which is users. Users not only being a name now, but really with a user ID and a clear name of the user, etc.
Hmm.
And so how could they introduce that to all applications, also the ones they are not in control with, right? They could ask everybody, hey, add this new field, association to users, to your orders, and you to customers, and the other ones to invoices. Or they could go to the core team, think of that like Java lang object, and convince the owner of Java lang object to add this new field creator to be an association to users. Well, as you can see here, the users has to be
Yeah.
imported. And here you have the problem. The core guys would say we would never import something from a layer on top of us, right?
Yeah.
Means that doesn't work. The Java model doesn't work. Now, what could they do else? They could introduce a new enhanced business object here and convince these guys to inherit this one instead of the one from core. But then they have to talk and change everything. Now, what does CDS allow you to? You might imagine you just do it the right way around. You say, I'm using business objects from core. Now I'm in the right order. Core is a layer below me. And I would just extend the definition of business object with a new field called creator, which should be an association to users, and we are all fine. And these guys don't even have to import that via a using statement. They just have to make sure that this file is loaded when their server starts as well. And this is very easy in CDS with an npm install or an maven install. And then your world is extended by somebody you don't even know, right? And this
Exactly.
is what aspect-oriented programming is actually about. Not going to the owner of that guy, that thing, but you can always extend something that you even don't own.
So, I mean, I'm just conscious of time, and
Mhm.
maybe well, maybe this has to be a good place to stop. But
Yeah.
before we stop, one of the practical other sides of the same coin of this aspect orientation and the ability to do exactly what you did to solve an effectively organizational problem the reason why it works is not only because of CDS, I would posit, but also because of the way that, yeah, going back to ORMs, and I'm thinking of David Heinemeier Hansson and Ruby on Rails, where they popularized in my small brain the idea of convention over configuration. And the runtime of CAP makes it, you don't have to use your brain at all to make sure everything gets loaded. So by convention, there's certain extensions and certain paths that are looked within to find the CDS files to load into the actual CDS model, right? And so I think, I don't know whether you disagree or agree, folks, and Daniel, but it's the combination of this aspect-oriented design plus the way that CAP works for real that is the true double power there.
Yeah. So we ran out of time, so I ran out of time. So sorry about this. There would be a second half of it where we go into the science part of that and what a prototype system means versus a class system. Yeah, DJ would be looking forward to having that follow-up session as soon as possible. So when it's still
Yes.
fresh, because that is something that people should understand then.
Well, let us know in the chat, folks, and also let us know anywhere anywhere you type things these days. Goodness knows where. Whether you would like to see more sessions in a series. I certainly would like to see more sessions. So we are going to bloody do more sessions. I don't care what you say, to be honest, but it's always nice to ask you, right? I said it out loud. Seriously though, after TechEd and after Daniel Schlachter says, bring it on. After TechEd finishes and after Devtoberfest weeks 3 and 4, we're sort of back to normal in terms of, this crazy, brilliant learning season. I think then we'll start with hands-on SAP dev slots. And so basically, as soon as Devtoberfest finishes, then Friday after that, we'll do this session, this follow-on session to complete the domain modeling and then go from there. How's that sound?
Yeah. And let us also know which of that one you would like to cover, or the ones that are not covered here, like things that you would like to deep dive us on.
Yeah, let us know. Contact me. I'll be the filter for this. Contact me somehow, and I'll relay that back to Daniel, and I'll organize the next session and the series. So it just goes for me to say thank you so much for Cap Papa, or to Cap Papa, for kicking off this session, blowing my mind as usual, and blowing yours, I'm sure, as well. So Chanakia says, bring it on. Great to hear from the Papa. Excellent. So Daniel, you have the last word.
Thank you. And sorry for being confused again. So again, was not with any preparation, right?
All the best sessions are unprepared. And with that, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Capirates, and we'll see you soon. Have a great Devtoberfest. Bye, folks.
Bye.